Well, many years ago, even before I was born, one chilly Halloween night, instead of going trick-or-treating with his friends and gathering candy throughout the neighborhood, having fun, one young boy, who you may know of, named Linus, spent the evening in a pumpkin patch, awaiting the arrival of the great pumpkin, yes. Linus believed that the great pumpkin would fly through the air bringing toys to all the children of the world. Now, this is not the more orthodox Linus we know from the Christmas special, but he is sincere in his beliefs. You know what else is sincere? His pumpkin patch. See, according to Linus, each year the great pumpkin rises out of the pumpkin patch that he thinks is the most sincere. He says, he's got to pick this one. He's got to. I don't see how a pumpkin patch can be more sincere than this one. You can look around, and there's not a sign of hypocrisy. Nothing but sincerity as far as the eye can see. I'm not sure what that means in terms of a pumpkin patch, but we live in a culture that tells us that what really matters is to just believe in yourself, in anything. Just have faith. Be sincere. It doesn't matter what, so long as you really mean it. Faith in faith, you might call it. It's like the rise of the nuns. No, not the religious ladies with the habits. The nuns, N-O-N-E-S. People who check the box that says nun for their religious affiliation. It's not that they don't believe in anything. Many of these people call themselves spiritual but not religious. And many of these nuns have a rich spirituality, but without the trappings and obligations of traditional religions. Linus in the pumpkin patch, on the other hand, does have concrete beliefs, and he has faith, completely devoted, utterly sincere. But the great pumpkin is a no-show. And it's not because his pumpkin patch wasn't sincere enough. It's not because Linus didn't believe hard enough. It's because that sincerity ran up against an inconvenient truth. Linus was sincerely wrong about the existence of the great pumpkin. It's as simple as that. Sometimes being sincere is not enough. Linus also made the assumption that sincerity and hypocrisy can't coexist in his pumpkin patch. But are those two things really mutually exclusive? Can you be both sincere and a hypocrite? What if it were possible that the very sincerity of our own religious practice or personal devotional life could actually blind us to the truth of our own hypocrisy? Well, let's look at a couple of examples. Our gospel reading brings us Jesus in the synagogue provoking one more conflict with the religious leaders over the Sabbath. This dear lady that he finds here has suffered under a spiritual oppression for 18 long years that has disabled her physically, bending her over so that she can't straighten her body, curved in on herself, shut off from the world around her. Jesus wastes no time when he sees her. She has suffered long enough. He heals her through speech and touch, recalling both the creation and the incarnation. He brought the cosmos into being by his speech. Now he heals this woman with his speech. He lays hands on her, because the Creator has come in the flesh as one of us to heal our very humanity. He's now physical, and he's working through the material. And she's immediately cured and begins to glorify God. Well, what's the reaction? Instead of rejoicing that this poor woman has been freed in his synagogue, instead of considering what this amazing thing might mean, the synagogue leader is having none of it. He completely misses the goodness of what's happening here. See, his job is to ensure that the people know and observe the law. And that includes keeping the Sabbath. After all, hadn't God commanded the observance of the Sabbath? Isn't this disregard the sort of thing that got them kicked out of the land and sent into exile in Babylon for 70 years? Isn't this exactly what Isaiah was warning the nation about in our Old Testament reading? In the passage we read from Isaiah, God is responding to the Israelites who wonder why things aren't going well for them. One of the many things he upbraids them for is their negligent observance of the Sabbath, using it to pursue their own interests. Aha, see? Isn't that exactly what Jesus and this lady are doing? That's why we have to be strict about these things. I mean, we already have the Roman occupiers here. The future of the nation balances on the edge of a knife. And here's Jesus playing games with it. And trampling on the Sabbath was only one of the laundry list of evils that they were up to in the Isaiah reading. But if we back up to the beginning of that chapter, before our reading began, we learned something else about those people. It turns out they're not just wanton hedonists. No, in fact, we find out that they are sincere religious hypocrites. God says this about them: they seek me daily and delight to know my ways and delight to draw near to God. What? These are the same people that he's complaining about just a few verses later? Ouch. So what's going on here? They ask him, "Why have we fasted and you see it not? Why have we humbled ourselves and you take no knowledge of it?" It sure sounds like they're being sincere Jews here. Aren't they doing the right things? What gives? Why isn't God coming to their rescue? Why isn't Yahweh answering their prayers? Aren't they right to complain about this? Well, yes, they are certainly doing these things. From the outside, if you only look at their personal devotional lives, things look great. Everything shines. How sincere they are. But back up a step to get a wider view. Scratch a bit deeper. Look at how they relate to those in need around them, and that pristine surface starts to flake. See, the problem, God tells them, it's not that stuff that they're doing. The problem lies in their hypocrisy. You see, theirs was a self-seeking spirituality and an instrumental religion. It was not grounded in truth, and it wasn't allowed to touch the rest of their life. It was merely transactional. It was safe. It sounds uncomfortably familiar. Maybe they would have called themselves spiritual but not religious. Spiritual technique, magic. I do this, I pray this prayer, I make this offering, and God will do that. The Desert Fathers had a phrase for their self-absorbed condition, incurvatus in se, curved in on oneself. Because that's what the sin-sick soul is. It's curved in on itself, bent over, like this poor woman's body in the synagogue. And what true spirituality does is the work to unbend our souls so that they are open outward to God and to others. And then that spills out into the world around us. But these Israelites, in spite of their religiosity, ignore the plight of those around them. It's like they can't even see it. They don't help the poor. They actively oppress their workers. This is what got them in trouble. This is what got them sent to Babylon. So the Pharisees responded to the exile with great concern to avoid a repeat of this. We got to protect the law. So they erected what they called a hedge around the law. If I can't get to the law itself, it's going to be hard for me to break it, right? If I can't even reach it. So they made lists, including things like things not to do that you can't do on the Sabbath. One list has 39 main tasks prohibited on the Sabbath, including things like tying or untying a knot, writing or erasing 2 letters. 1 is okay, 2 is too many. Carrying objects from one place to another, and many, many more things. But they weren't rigid about this. They did make exceptions. But what they did do was in a very human way. They got so focused on their hedge that they forgot what the Sabbath was for in the first place. Their vision became just as narrow as these folks in Isaiah. So why is their understanding of the Sabbath such a sore spot for Jesus? Why does he make it such a point of conflict? He seems to revel in this particular conflict. Well, let's think about the reasons why God commanded Sabbath observance in the first place. When God gave them the law on Mount Sinai at the Exodus, as they were leaving Egypt and entering the wilderness, one of the things he gave them was the 10 Commandments. And Sabbath keeping is one of those, right? The big 10, the big list of 10. They're not to do any work on the Sabbath. Not them, not their children, not their servants, not their livestock, and not even the foreigners who are among them. Because, here's what he says, in 6 days, the Lord made everything and rested on the 7th day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So the first reason he gives them points back to the creation. A generation later, they're finally about to leave the wilderness and enter the promised land. He gives them the law again. This time with a second reason to keep the Sabbath. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. And the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. Creation and Exodus, release, loosing. Sabbath observance was to help them call to mind the goodness of God in creating the world and then liberating them from captivity in Egypt. To recognize that God is their provider, and to trust him with the practical necessities of life. The Pharisees ended up making Sabbath keeping itself the point. Jesus said it was the other way around. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And so now, here he is. Jesus, himself the fulfillment of the Old Testament law, the fulfillment of the Sabbath, healing in the synagogue on the Sabbath. The synagogue leader, we are told, is indignant at this flagrant disregard for the Sabbath. But he doesn't address Jesus directly. Maybe he's heard of Jesus' skill at turning things around on his accusers and making fools of them. I don't know. He turns to the crowd instead and chides them. There are more appropriate days to come for healing. Are there? Luke interprets this healing for us by giving us two parables that Jesus told immediately following this incident. Both of them are about the growth of the kingdom of God. A mustard seed, tiny, hidden, grows into a mighty tree. A tiny bit of leaven, hidden in dough, fills the whole batch, causing it to rise. This healing is no random act of mercy. It's a small seed that illustrates the true nature of the Sabbath. It's a sign of the kingdom that can't be shaken, breaking into the world. A tiny seed that will grow to fill the whole world. Like the giving of the Sabbath as a reminder of creation and Exodus, Jesus chooses a Sabbath to heal this woman as a hidden seed of his new creation and the new Exodus that he's bringing about. At this point, Jesus calls the religious leaders on their hypocrisy. They make Sabbath-keeping exceptions to untie their animals to give them water. Of course, that's a fair thing for them to do, but Jesus asks, ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day? If the Sabbath day is about the Exodus, if it's a day for the loosing of bonds, who should be unbound? Just the animals? No, of course not. There is no more appropriate day for this woman to be freed. It's not just an okay day to heal, it's the best day to heal. And while he should have delighted in this moment, the synagogue leader's sincere but misguided, misplaced devotion was actively blinding him to the true nature of the Sabbath and its fulfillment in his very midst. But lest we forget, he didn't know that he was the villain in this story. Villains rarely do in real life. He thought he was the hero, at least up until this moment. Luke does tell us that Jesus' opponents were put to shame by his response to them. Maybe he used this as a moment of clarity and repentance. My fear is that it hardened him instead. But it gives me pause. And it makes me wonder where my blind spots are. This man guarded the Sabbath with a sincere zeal, but missed that the Lord of the Sabbath was standing right in front of him. What am I missing? May the Lord straighten our bent souls and free us from our hypocrisies, that we may be completely his, transformed and filled to overflowing with his life, spilling over into the world around us. And maybe he be gentle in doing so.